Good morning, everybody. I'm Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and this is Charter Moms Chats, 9 a.m. Central on weekdays, and we are responding to the need of like what parents need to know to do distance learning, to keep their kids learning at home this summer. We're starting to think about back to school and what that's going to look like, and we have a guest today. Lara Kilgore is the CEO of Beyond Education, and they have been in business for several years offering things like tutoring services, but they also help coach families with homeschooling. And so the topic today is homeschooling support. And we're going to have a discussion with Lara about like, what are we hearing from families? Why are they looking at homeschooling now, especially, right, because of COVID? And what are some of the questions that brings up? And then we will be looking at the comments. So if you have a question during the video, I can fly that up on screen and Laura can talk about it, but we've kind of mapped out what we think are the most pressing issues right now. So, okay, so Laura, tell us a little bit more about Beyond Education, and kind of like what you've been doing and how you're pivoting to kind of meet the need, what families are needing these days.
Right. So I've been in the one-on-one education space for over 10 years and started in the tutoring capacity. And then when I started Beyond Education, thought I was going to kind of remain in this tutoring college advising capacity, and had a close friend of mine who approached me about homeschooling. They had decided to homeschool and asked if that's something I would consider. And at the time said, I don't have any experience in this. I'm a public school kid. I went to a private university. Like, that's my experience in education, but I'll give it a shot. And we had an amazing experience with their child, and then grew from there, and started to realize at the time for a specific set of students that homeschooling was really a valuable tool, and saw great success with these students. And so we established ourselves as basically this homeschooling company, in addition to the tutoring and the college advising that we were doing. And now with COVID and parents trying to look for a solution that's consistent and manageable, we've seen a huge rise in, or increase in, interest in homeschooling. And so that's just changed our conversation with our own families that we've been working with for the past 2.5 years, but also just with the general public, as far as just being a resource to guide and discuss what does homeschool look like in Texas, what does that look like if you're going to pull your student out, if you want to do a small co-op, because we learned really early on that it feels like a huge leap of faith to do homeschool, especially if, for most of us, we grew up in a traditional school setting. You know, I know you and I have talked about this before, but this whole school choice idea is pretty novel. And so add homeschooling to it, and it just feels like this massive hurdle to overcome, because you as the parent are the one who is in charge of everything, right? Like, where to start? Are there any laws or legislation about it? And so I wanted to just discuss that now, because that is a lot of the conversations that we're having, as far as what does it look like to jump into homeschool? Can we do it? Is it affordable? Is it manageable? Will our kids still love us if we do this? Like, is it going to create more stress in an already stressful time? So that's where we're at.
Yeah. So, I mean, this has come up in the group, but I want to ask you kind of, what are you hearing from parents about why they're more interested in homeschooling this year? And like, obviously COVID is a factor, but there were some factors that I think people were already like, right, things like standardized testing, or you know, like there were families like my family, like I homeschooled my son when he would have been in first grade, and it's because he has special needs, and we couldn't find a traditional public school that would fit his needs, and the charter school we wanted wasn't open yet. So it's like, okay, here we go. And it felt like we were getting away with something somehow. But you know, but I think a lot of families are like, but yeah, so like what are you hearing from families, like the ones who are just now considering it for the first time? Like, what factors are influencing them?
Yeah, so I think this summer specifically is really centered around COVID-19, and the fact that families are starting to realize that schools can't promise consistency, and they can't promise a school that we're used to. And so parents are looking for something that they can control, that they can manage, that they know this is going to be consistent. Every Monday through Friday, this is what it's going to look like. We don't have to think about whether or not we're going to go to distance learning, or you're going to be in school this week and out of school the next week, and not wear a mask this week and wear a mask the next week. I think people want a sense of consistency because it gives us peace of mind and everything, right? Like as humans, we like schedule. And I think that comes with education as well. We're used to when August comes, we send our kids to school from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And now that can't be guaranteed, and extracurriculars and things like that can't be guaranteed, then parents are now looking at, okay, well, what is a way that I could offer consistency to my child? What is there another method that I could say, okay, school is going to look the same every Monday through Friday, even if that's doing it in home. Now, to your point, the conversation before COVID was very much about what are the particular needs that my child needs to be successful, because school is now becoming a huge stressor. Whether that's because they have specific needs for learning disabilities or processing issues or physical needs, whatever that is, stress and test anxiety over taking state tests. That was mainly the conversation, I would say, this time a year ago. Now it's shifted to a broader conversation of, okay, can we guarantee a consistent school schedule using homeschool? And typically the answer is yes. It feels more controllable than what schools are offering now, for better or for worse.
Right. For our decision making about what to do for next year. So my son is on the autism spectrum, and one of his challenges is transitions are hard, and it's been in his IEP since he was 4 years old. That coming back from a break, even after Christmas break or spring break, it's hard for him to get back in the routine of school. Like if he's been at home, and we have a fairly structured life at home. It's just a different schedule, and so like that back and forth. So one of my concerns about the coming school year is that it's right. So it seems likely that schools will reopen their campuses, but it's also possible that there will be spikes in cases. And actually there's a spike in cases happening right now in San Antonio, which is pretty scary. And I thought maybe that would happen in the fall. Well, it's happening like right now. And that's that level of uncertainty, right? Is that, like if schools reopen and they, have practices that slow the spread of the disease, there's benefits to having kids on campus, but there's always that asterisk or that uncertainty of like, what if they have to suddenly close campuses again? Like maybe there's a case at that particular, in your kid's classroom or at that campus. What if there's so much citywide community spread that all the schools have to close for a certain period of time, right? A lot of districts are announcing revised school calendars for the coming year. They're inserting extra weeks, right? Like I think SASD added weeks like kind of between the quarters or like after break. So they're trying to, have people like stay home, work safe, for periods of time during the school year, hoping to kind of slow the spread, right? Or have like time for deep cleaning on campuses. This is just a lot to process, right? And it's creating this feeling of families being like, we were talking to our friend Amber yesterday and also your friend Terry, and they were saying that it's this feeling of lack of control, that you're at the mercy of what's happening with COVID and how the institutions are responding to it. And as parents, you really, it's hard to predict, and it's hard to create that stability and consistency for your kids.
Right. And I know you and I have sat in on different meetings with schools kind of announcing their plans, and you referenced SAISD. My heart goes out to schools because they're trying to create plans and be as clear as possible. But the reality is it's impossible to have everything planned out. And I think that's becoming more and more evident to families of we can't plan for every situation. We don't have a perfectly clear answer on what happens if a kid comes to school then tests positive, or a teacher tests positive. What does that look like? What does that mean? And so I think because of that, that's where there's this search for consistency and continuity. And I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah, really. You make a very good point that I'm not. I like the school leaders, like the principals, the teachers, and the superintendents, and the school boards are in a really tough situation. And So I tend to take the sort of the parent perspective, right? And that's our mission, is right to be a trusted information source for parents. That's the SU Sharma's mission. But I have deep empathy for what the schools are trying to do, because they're seeing like, how do we get kids a year's worth of learning under these conditions where maybe you can't have as many kids in the same classroom, or maybe some kids are at home and they might not have, right, they're not accessing in-person instruction, or there might be like, issues with how they're connecting to the internet. So yeah, it's a really, I know they care about the children and they're trying to do their best, and they're trying to communicate what their plans are. And meanwhile, parents are really stressed out. So
right, it's a very complex situation for sure.
Yeah. So I think what a lot of parents who have never, like, they're finding in themselves like thinking about homeschooling, and then maybe they never thought about it before, and then but you've helped families with this in the past, right? The team at Beyond Education has helped families. So what kinds of things should they be thinking about if they're considering diving into the homeschooling world?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, if you're a family in Texas, be relieved that you are in a state that is probably one of the most pro homeschool. It is the easiest to do it, which can't be said for all of the 49 other states. So that being said, it's not this like complicated, you have to fill out paperwork, which I think a lot of people assume at first. Again, being raised in a traditional education mindset, like, where do I sign this document? Who do I have to notify? And it's actually pretty simple. You would notify your school that you're going to homeschool, and that's about it. I think some of the big things to jump into are, one, figuring out what curriculum you want to do, which is probably one of the biggest tasks to undertake, because there are so many different homeschool curriculums. And one of the things that I'll ask families who approach us about homeschooling is kind of like a dichotomous key of, first question for curriculum is, do you want to do faith-based or not? Because that tends to be the biggest break in homeschool curriculum. And once you kind of have an answer to that question, then it'll automatically lead you to a couple different options. I think the other thing too, when we're talking about curriculum, and these are some of the things that I'm addressing with our families that we work with, is if you're going to do this for a short time, right? If this is like a COVID response homeschooling and you're not looking at this for the rest of your child's education, I would highly recommend curriculums that have an all-inclusive package. So you may find that some curriculums will only do English or only do math. They have a specialty. And there's some curriculums who you can just purchase a grade, right? So I'm going to get the whole second grade curriculum that includes everything. I would really recommend for those families who are looking at this for just a short-term thing to go with an all-inclusive curriculum. I think some of the other things too to keep in mind is that there are no state tests. There are no exams. There's no re-entry exam if you are going back to a public school. It would be a good conversation to have with charter schools or private schools if they would require you to do a re-entry exam. But there's not some big hurdle to get back into school once they get to a state that you feel comfortable sending your child back to school. And then I think the other thing is just that the parent is the assessor, which again freaks people out because they think, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Like, I'm going to mess my kid up. I'm going to get this all wrong. But if you have a solid curriculum that is, approved for that particular grade, and you just follow their system, and Inga, this would be great for you to speak to with your son's experience of what that looked like and kind of the stress as a parent of, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? With a solid homeschool curriculum, if you just follow their pacing and get in a schedule, you're going to be fine. And that's what we're doing with families and Beyond Education. So families hire us to come in and basically be the teacher, be the facilitator for the curriculum. So we identify one that we're going to use, and then we come in and say, hey, we're going to teach them, we're going to assess them as a third party so that you don't have to wear that hat as well, and ensure that your child is getting this done.
Yeah. So for when my son was in first grade, the intention was for it to be short term, that we were hoping that he would eventually get off the waiting list and get an offer at Great Hearts. And so how it worked out was, yeah, he got an offer in June. And so I never had to buy curriculum for second grade. I was starting to research it. I was getting nervous by June, but instead I got to buy uniforms. So that was better. So because I knew there was a particular school we were on the waiting list for, I was able to research their curriculum. And so we didn't buy a package because I wanted to like kind of pick and choose. So like I know Great Hearts for elementary grades, they use Singapore math. And so I was able to order Singapore math workbooks, and then we worked on that at home. And then for other things like really, and actually this is something that your clients have probably brought up, that homeschooling during COVID is different than homeschooling before COVID, because a lot of what we did, like for art and science and history, was we had this like fistful of, oh wait, I have it in my bag. So I mean, like literally, like I have this like wallet full of memberships. So here's I have my hair tie on it, and I have, let's see, here we go. What do we got? We got botanical garden, we got library card, state parks, Witty, Frisco, Barnes and Noble. Ooh. Use that. Barnes and Noble. No, I'm getting distracted. But yeah, I mean, we go lots of places, and like those places have great activities. I'd say maybe the flip side of that now is like to tap into the sort of virtual learning offerings that those local places are having. But yeah, we were the homeschoolers who were never home.
Right.
So things are, yeah. And then you mentioned like kind of re-entry. So when my son started second grade at Great Hearts, they did do like a placement test for math, and they put him in a group that needed extra support for math. But by the end of second grade, he was fine. And then one of my concerns, so one thing about homeschooling is like sometimes you have to pick your battles. And I decided that handwriting was a bridge too far. I just let him like either type or scribble or draw pictures. I mean, his reading skills were pretty good, but that the motor skills weren't there. And that I was like, they're just gonna have to clean that up at Great Hearts. And sure enough, within 6 months, he was doing cursive.
Wow.
So that's the power of really good teachers. Yeah. And he wasn't just okay cursive. He was like average for Great Hearts, which they have pretty high standards for handwriting. So yeah, I was like, and that's one thing I want to, I know I'm kind of hijacking your talk here, but like, I want to reassure the parents of homeschoolers that like kids do things at different rates. And so if you feel like your kid is ahead on one thing or behind on another, it's probably all going to work out as long as you are still watching things, you're talking to people, right? Like talk to your beyond EDU mentor, right? Talk to, friends. If you think there is a deficit, like your child needs speech therapy, get speech therapy, even if it's teletherapy, right? I'm signing my son up for, there's a psychologist that he sees who kind of keeps an eye on, the autism stuff, and she's going to do teletherapy with him next week. So, so like, yes, things might seem out of sync, but don't freak out. And there's help out there. You just, don't be shy about asking for help.
Absolutely. Well, and you brought up a couple great points that I want to address. One, you mentioned that you looked into Great Hearts and what materials they used and did your curriculum around that. So that's actually a conversation that we're having with a lot of parents who, again, this is a response to COVID. So this is a short-term homeschooling platform, is to actually try and mimic the same curriculums that they would do at their school. So if they know, whether from the school directly or from another family who has already gone through that grade, if they know what materials they're using, then go and seek out those materials. And you can typically buy those, even though you're a parent, you can typically buy instructor manuals and things like that to do it. So I think that's really valuable because, again, the goal is reentry. Then they get to reenter knowing that they've done almost the exact same materials or at least the same principles as their peers and stay on track. The other thing that you said, I 100% agree with, which is your kid moves at their own pace, right? And that's okay. Yeah. And we've learned that with the students we've worked with in homeschooling. And now that we've had a couple of years under our belt and have seen, similar to your son, and going to Great Hearts and saying, you know what, I'm not taking on this battle of handwriting, but you had the time to see, like, it all worked out. We've had students where the same thing, like there's battles that we chose not to fight in the first year, but now that we're 2-3 years into it, they're way beyond because I think we didn't create that friction that made it something that they loathed and hated. We didn't force it. So I would agree with you on that. For any parents who are doing it, if you're getting a lot of pushback on a particular subject, or you're seeing something is really hard, then just pull back from it and focus on the things that they're really strong in. We can acknowledge that it's already an incredibly stressful time globally. So I think anything where you can take away a stressor or decrease a stressor for you and your family is going to be worth it. That being said, I think a really valuable resource, again, for Texas families is if you're ever concerned that you're off base, that you're not, making sure that your child is getting the education that they need or whatnot, TEKS, which is the Texas Education Guideline, is always accessible. You can Google TEKS for a specific grade, and you can find the list of what Texas guideline says that a student in that grade needs to know or needs to be able to comprehend in order to be proficient and move on to the next grade. So that's something that we use as well with our families. We'll basically say, here are the TEKS for this grade. This is what we're thinking. This is where they're at. These are their strengths, deficiencies, places where we need to keep working. And so it's a really helpful.
This is the app. This is the TEKS app that I just flew up the link.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So it's. I mean, you can Google it, and but you can get it in an app form as well. So if you want to check, like, what are they supposed to be learning, and you can look at other states as well. But this is right. This helps with the reentry question. Because so for example, like my kids just finished 4th grade and 7th grade, which are coincidentally both years when they learned Texas history. So we're kind of supplementing Texas history. I mean, we're using graphic novels. I mean, it's kind of not intense, but great. But just having the conversations about it, and like Texas history there's a lot of like kind of good and evil, or like they thought they were on the right side, that was actually wrong. Right? There's a lot of heavy stuff to talk about, and I like having those conversations as a family. Like I want them to hear it from their teachers, but I also want to be able to like have those conversations about right and wrong and talk about our family's values and talk about how it ties in with San Antonio. Like that's some of the, I think, the upside about homeschooling is like it can feel very insecure and you feel like you're flying without a net, but then there's those moments of like where you can personalize things, right? And I mean, I'm actually a California native, but I think there are families who have roots in Texas, who can like share those family stories and like enrich the homeschool experience that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it creates really natural conversations too for any of those families who are trying to figure out, what do we talk about right now? I mean, that's a very natural way to dive into and have dialogue about, things that are important, things that are of interest, things that you didn't realize you had opinions on as a parent. So
there's a comment from a listener saying, thanks for the info. Just so Laura, yes, thank you. I mean, you're filling an important need, and like you should feel really good about how you're stepping in, and you and your team are stepping in to fill a need that parents have. I guess the one thing we talked about before was how, like, okay, so it's the first day of July, and this is an opportunity, right? Because the school year hasn't started yet, right? We have the whole month of July, so right. So I mean, you can. It's good to be like, let's go to the river, or let's go for walks, or I mean, well, it's hot out, but do what you can to enjoy summer. Right? Yeah. So, but it's like, so while you're like enjoying summer with your family, it's like playing in the backyard or cooking out or, whatever that's safe to do. But this is also time for planning, right? You can plan curriculum, like as we've been talking about curriculum, and, there's tools and there's help available. So what are your suggestions for how parents can make the most of July to be preparing for the school year ahead?
Yeah, so I would, stay in contact with your school. That's changing, as we know, from many of the districts. So, keep in contact with them, figure out what they're doing. If you are starting to seriously consider homeschool, I would definitely use the month of July to start researching curriculums. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. One, there are a lot of great posts and blogs about it. I know that we have a blog post on curriculums that we're constantly updating now because there's just so many different options. I think another resource and tool that we use constantly is the Facebook group, San Antonio Homeschoolers, which is a local-based homeschool group. And there's many other branches of that. That's just one of the bigger ones here in town. And they're a great resource, similar to San Antonio Charter Moms. You know, it's very much like a helpful conversation of, hey, my kid is in this grade and we're considering this curriculums. What do you guys think? And they're very active, similar to your blog, Inga, as far as offering really helpful advice and support. I just recently saw one post in there about doing kind of a new term that came up in a conversation from San Antonio Charter Moms, kind of a micro school model. And there were lots of fantastic advice given by parents, some point of views that I didn't even think through. They also have co-op resources, which we haven't talked a lot about today. Mostly, so co-ops are this idea that homeschool families get together and do activities together, have socialization opportunities. There are some that are subject specific or topic specific. There are some that are just predominantly socialization and no education. There's some that it's kind of like a school, a one-room school model. I would say that if you are looking to get into one of those co-ops right now, most of them, from what I've seen, are still staying virtual. So a lot of the well-established co-ops are still practicing physical distancing right now. So I just want to put that out there for families.
Right. What to expect.
We'll get into co-ops and then everything will be the same. That's not necessarily true, but
right.
Stay knowledgeable about what co-ops are doing. I would recommend getting into those Facebook groups. So I think for the month of July, starting to research the curriculum, joining some different groups where you can ask advice on those curriculums. You can check out our resources with Beyond Education. We're going to continue to post a ton of stuff. We've also got a webinar specifically to talk about homeschool with some well-established groups like Texas Homeschool Coalition, to just kind of go through all the nitty-gritty of it, and just think through those pieces. I think if you can get the curriculum down and have an idea on that, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. And again, it doesn't mean, I mean, the nice part is if you know what the curriculum is that you want, and let's say August comes and the school comes out with a plan that you really like, well, then you can still go with the school, right? You're not locked in.
Right.
And it goes the other way as well.
Right. Yeah, you can that. I mean, that's you know, a core part of our mission at San Antonio Charter Moms is that, like, we think the decision making needs to rest with the parents. The parents just need access to more information, because that was a struggle for me as I was trying to navigate this for my son, like find a school where he could succeed, and you know, and just have this basic information about. And you know, I was Googling, like, wait, what does a withdrawal letter look like? You know, there's form letters, right? You mentioned Homeschool Legal Defense Association, like they have form letters that you could just kind of cut and paste, and then you know, I did a certified mail return receipt because I just wanted that proof, you know. But yeah, it's really pretty. I mean, you can drop it off. It's these things are doable. Like the things that may have seemed unthinkable before, they are very thinkable. And you know, there's kind of no going back. It's like once you realize that the parent is in the driver's seat, you know, you become a more like skeptical or just a more discerning consumer of education, right? And I think that's part of what happened in the spring with remote learning, is that you know, because parents were filling that role of like sitting down with their kid and, you know, making sure they were filling out the worksheets or something. And it's like, so that's what they've been working on at school.
Right.
And sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, like, wow, you know, those are really good questions about that reading passage. And sometimes you're like, I don't know about this. You know, does that really teach music theory? Just filling out this worksheet? I don't know, you know? And so if there is a silver lining to this, I think if it's getting parents more engaged and more critical thinking about how their kids are getting educated. And I guess it's interesting because Beyond Education, you have these you know, some of the mentors are themselves like college kids, right? And so they're kind of close in age to the students. And so you talk to a lot of college kids about what they're going through, and you help like for years you've been helping like high schoolers with, like, you know, college advising and prep for standardized tests and things like that. So you see, you know, sort of that stage in the process. I think homeschoolers worry about that transition of, right, how do I launch my kid into adulthood, and it brings up good conversations about you know, building independence, building intrinsic motivation. Right, like the other day we were talking to our friend Stephanie, who leads a lot of project-based learning type things, and well, might have to be a topic for another day. But that's something that's been on my mind a lot. It's like, how do you build independence when kids aren't in that structured school environment?
Right.
Where they're being told, like, do this. It's 8:15. Do this. It's
Well, on
9:50.
the other side too, I mean, is that true independence to be told what to do in a school setting, right? I think it is schedule for sure, and it is routine.
Mm-hmm.
This is a conversation that I've been having with myself a lot, just as I've kind of dived into what is the school system, how did it originate, and kind of like your comment, this may be a conversation for later. But if we want to talk about, fear of what you mentioned of, is there going to be like a failure to launch if we do homeschool? And this is specifically for families who are either looking at it for homeschooling their high schoolers who may be getting ready to transition to college, or if you have a great experience with homeschooling and you're really looking at this as a long-term solution. I think just like school, there are so many different options and there's many different ways to support your kid in their schooling system. That you can easily create an independent learner in a school system, or you can create a very dependent learner in a school system. Same goes with homeschool. You can create whatever atmosphere and environment you want within a homeschooling situation. And also honoring kind of what we said before, honoring the child's individuality and their process of maturity, honoring where their strengths and their weaknesses are in it. But I will say, I mean, I've worked with homeschooling families who are applying to college, and they have had just as much, if not sometimes more, success in getting into college and being successful in the college environment from a long-term homeschool situation. So I think that fear can easily be dismantled just with testimonials of success in that way. And I think to your point as well, we saw a huge difference in the conversation around homeschooling when the distance learning started in March and April. To your point of, we're seeing what our kids are doing. We're seeing the worksheets they're doing. We're seeing what their teachers are teaching them or aren't teaching them. And so if this is what it is, we might be able to do this in some capacity or have somebody come in and help us do this from home. Whereas I would say before March of 2020, it was a much tougher conversation to convince somebody that you could do homeschool successfully. It was more like, well, this is our last ditch effort. Like, this is the last thing we have. So I guess we'll try homeschool. Whereas now it's like, well, actually this might be the best option.
Right. The barriers have come down between, right. Yeah. Because choosing between remote learning with a school versus homeschooling with support, it doesn't seem like that big a gulf anymore. Right. Yeah. So wow, it's just been a great conversation, and I feel like we could keep talking for a long time. But I think the most important thing is that I know you have a lot of things in the works right now as far as like webinars and talks and stuff like that. And so I guess I'm gonna fly up the link for the charter discussion group, because so basically, like, as Lara gets these projects ready to share, we'll be sharing them in the SHRM's discussion group. So I encourage everybody who's listening to please sign up for those webinars and just keep educating yourself about. And if you have friends who are talking about this, tell them about, share this video with them, get them thinking about these possibilities. And because like you said, we're still following and listening, to what our kids' schools are doing, but it just pays to use this time to prepare so that, whatever the world looks like in August, you can roll with it, right? You can have that consistency.
Yep, and I would just encourage anybody who's interested or want more information, you can get in touch with us via our website. Like I said, we are posting different blog articles and resources weekly about homeschooling now. We really shifted almost entirely to talk about homeschooling and put some of our other services on the back burner for the time being. And then you and I are kind of in this group planning some different education chats with the Impact Guild. And then yes, Beyond Education is doing a homeschool specific webinar, possibly a series, at least one event. And I would just reiterate, the goal of this conversation and San Antonio Charter Moms, it's really about empowering parents to make the best decision for your child. And I know you've said this before, but this is not about a bias. I'm not trying to get everybody to do homeschool. I don't think it's necessarily the best fit for everybody. It may be a good fit for just this specific time in history, but really the goal is about empowering the parent to find the best fit for their child, whatever that is. So happy to have a conversation and be resourceful in whatever the best choice is for your kid, whether that's private, public, charter, homeschool, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, I know, I mean, you are a leader in the community for sharing information about stuff like this. And I'm really grateful for that, for your work. And I'm grateful that you're on the show and that you're active in the SA Charter Moms group, like, you know, like the San Antonio Homeschoolers group, and you help answer questions and share resources, because I think parents supporting each other that's how we're going to get through this.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me join you today.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so everybody, the URL is down here. Beyond EDU, that's how you can get in touch with Laura and read the blog post and keep an eye out for the webinars, and we'll get through this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Laura.